This is the 100th episode of Back to One. Thank you so much for helping us reach this milestone. I promise to only do this once every 100 episodes. Would you please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen? This show's not for everyone, but there are a lot of people who it's perfect for who don't know it exists. Leaving reviews, sharing it, helps us find those listeners. Thanks again.
I feel like when I'm about to play a character, everything in the world, the way I perceive it is informed by that character. And if everything that happens feeds the thing that I'm about to play.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Andrea Riseborough is an actor. She sat down with me in New York City to talk about the work. You land the role, you get the script, you shut the door, you're alone. What's the first thing you typically do to begin the process of inhabiting these characters?
Well, it never really happens with that kind of consistency. So I'd say the more familiar beginning is I'm offered something. I've read it, it ruminates, it sticks with me. Once I've stepped into that realm of existence, kind of reverse back out of it. But I may or may not end up doing the project. And that's really where it starts. So I think the seed's planted the first time, that sometimes even before reading the script, with a connection to a filmmaker who wants to work with you. That's sort of where the conversation begins, and what the story is, and what my character inside of that is becomes more and more clear the more information that I have sort of about this person who I'm thinking about playing. And then, it's funny because there are so many projects, there are so many characters in my mind that I haven't played, as many as I have, that I turned down, or that really inform who I am as a person as well, because I thought so very much about them. So it's something that starts very, very early on, the relationship with a character, and I may or may not end up playing them, which is really interesting. And I actually, in a way, don't think it matters. But I really like working that way. I don't know any other way to work than from the inside out. There are certain external things that really help. Reading images, often talking to people. If somebody really existed, then you have a huge wealth of material, because you have not only their relationship with the world, but how everybody else was affected by them. And you're trying to get to the truth of somebody who actually existed. If they didn't exist and they're an imaginary, a fictional character, part of your responsibility is to create them. And that's always a really enjoyable process, because I think that's where I thrive, possibly physically and mentally, and in all the ways that's where I thrive, because I really like filling in gaps. And then you were saying, you were talking about shutting the door and being alone in a room, and it's just something that rarely happens. I think it's really important to note that it's fantastic if you have the sort of, not only the ability to the capacity as an actor to be able to do what somebody like Daniel Day-Lewis does, but also the financial backing where you don't need to do everything. That's fantastic. But I think and I'm sure in those, for people who aren't relying on this craft as their bread and butter, so to speak, there may be more space and time, just like anything. Just like a working mum trying to do a degree at the same time. You know, it's as opposed to a student trying to do a degree at the same time. The difference of the amount of space and time that you're able to devote to something is just vast. But I think, for the most part, artists, actors, anyone in the creative realm, just like every other industry, we're all flying on the seat of our pants, you know? Yeah. And there's very rarely a closed door, there's very rarely a quiet moment. There's certainly always something to fight for. I think that's true of every industry. There's definitely no moment to rest on your laurels. And within that, it's really difficult to, I think, all of which is to say, it's very difficult to have a consistent process. And I would love, and I'll put it this way, to be financially able to have that. Because I put a lot of the money that I make into making other people, young filmmakers' films, and that's a choice. Yeah. But that's part of what feeds my soul, you know, seeing those films like Nancy come to fruition against all odds, connecting people like Christine Shaw and Barbara Broccoli, an obvious pairing, but it could as easily have not happened that they connected and that Nancy was not made. Sometimes I almost feel like there's just so much to do. There's so much to do and there's so little time.
But if you had the time and the money, would that equal more stuff that you would take in? Is it that you can't get enough research? You can't get enough?
No. I feel like that's just second nature to me. I feel like when I'm about to play a character, everything in the world, the way I perceive it is informed by that character. And everything that happens feeds the thing that I'm about to play, innately.
Yeah, this is so interesting because some people have said that they take a certain role because of what they need in their life at that moment.
And that happens as well.
I just find that so strange and hard to understand.
Imagine spending 6 months being in the mindset of losing a child.
Yeah.
There are times in your life when you may be grieving yourself, when that's the last thing that you could do. And there are times in your life where you may be grieving yourself, you may have just lost someone, or actually it's the thing that you need to do.
Yeah.
It just makes complete human sense. It's actually so much more basic than you'd imagine, in the sense that I think especially as an actor, I think if you're doing your job well, it's often not enjoyable because because in films people go through harrowing things and wonderful things, and so if it's harrowing, it's really going to feel harrowing. And I know there are some actors who are able to be removed from that. I'm not one of those people. But the choices that you make and the feeling of whether you'll be able to be of service to this particular project in this way, and whether it's right for you at this time to do that. I think those instincts are a huge part of being an actor. Honing those, following those instincts, listening to them. And as a kid, you don't.
Yeah.
And you do what you think is... I've always been quite strong about them, and I'm sure I've closed myself off to quite a lot of bad work because of that, and a lot of much more mainstream work. But I think as an actor, you really do spend that period of your life occupying this headspace for however long. If it isn't exploring something that's meaningful to you, or meaningful at all, or it isn't satiating writing, or it's not, wonderful people to actually be present with and connect with, then it just seems a bit like a waste of time. I guess it's what your motivation is.
Yeah.
Whether you want to be famous.
And what you want out of this, yeah.
Or whether you want to make money or have power, or be sexually powerful. There are all sorts of reasons why people attach themselves to the film industry.
Is this right that you did 65 plays when you were still in school?
I think by the time I got to RADA, I'd been in about 65, yeah. I mean, I didn't know that until I wrote down. The reason I know that, or the reason I've ever said it, is because when I wrote down my application for RADA, you had to write down all the plays you'd been in. And I was, I remember thinking, like, God, can it have been that many? But it really, I really had been in a lot of plays. I mean, they weren't,
Yeah.
They weren't all great. I'm sure they weren't all great performances. But I had a lot of experience, yes, and I loved theatre.
And then you meet Mike Leigh. Is this right?
Yeah, he saw me at the National. So I was in 3 plays at the National with Andy Garfield and me and Matt Smith. We were all sort of starting out, and we were doing a series of youth plays. They were like younger plays. And he saw me there. And yeah, that's where I met him. I then worked with Peter Hall, and Mike used to be Peter's assistant. He was his assistant director. And then after that, I worked with Mike's old assistant. So I worked with a whole chain of them. Mark Munden, who directed The Devil's Whore and National Treasure. For some reason, I appealed to that chain of men.
Yeah.
I mean, working with Mike was, in many ways, it was a little bit of a misleading entry into film, but like an amazing one.
That's kind of what I wanted to ask you. When I talked to people that worked with Mike, like Leslie Manville, they take a character, really, really develop it, and then they can leave it at the end of the day and go home. It seems like you, even when like on this 000, you got into an injury, and you were talking about how you were kind of still in the character, dealing with friends and stuff like that. So it's like you live with it. Once you're in, you kind of live it until it's done. Is that right?
It's so yes, but I think that's just become a coping strategy of doing film that isn't with Mike, because the way that Mike works is so protective of the process, the actor's process, that you really do feel like that is the end of your work day, and then you can go and live your life, and then you come in and adopt the character the next morning.
Yeah.
Whereas with, as we were saying, logistically, with all the things happening at the same time, and things being shot non-sequentially, which is how everything's shot, obviously, you don't get that luxury that you would with a filmmaker like Mike. And it's still difficult, I think, for it's still difficult that Mike doesn't have a script often to bring to a financier.
Right.
There's such a formulaic way that film is put together.
Yeah.
And it actually, I think, reduces its chance to develop and live outside of genre and be innovative where is a 40-minute film?
Yeah, right.
Just really basic questions that you sort of, things that you take for granted about film, about the way that we perceive film. I think there's so much room for invention, so much more room for invention.
Oh, yes.
It's a difficult balance, as always, between sort of commerce and creativity.
We'll be right back after this.
Are you an actor?
No, I'm a stuntman.
You're a stuntman. That's way better.
Why is that way better?
Actors are phony.
Oh.
They just say lines that other people write and pretend to murder people on their stupid TV shows. Meanwhile, real people are being murdered every day in Vietnam.
Join Peter Rinaldi for a special live taping of Back to One with special guest Margaret Qualley, the breakout star of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Fosse Verdon, in the upcoming My Salinger Year. Tuesday, March 24th at 7 p.m. at the Made in New York Media Center in Brooklyn. Tickets are free, but you must RSVP at nymediacenter.com.
George isn't blind! You're the blind one!
What do you need, ideally, on a set, like for you to work at your best?
I think if I were to imbue every set with exactly the environment that I needed to work specifically for me, it would reduce my experience, and it would also reduce the reality of the character that I was trying to, achieve. I think that
You actually feed off of.
It's really important to be flexible,
Yeah.
and for each environment to be different. If you're making something in the Deep South that's a period piece, it's really important for that to live there. And whatever the energy of the story is, it's really important for that to be reflected, and for the, especially if you get the opportunities I was talking about to actually film in the real locations, to allow that to then permeate like what you're creating, is a great gift. And I also think you can. We once shot Rebo, which is like a place in South Africa, for Oxfordshire on something that I was doing. We shot in Africa, pretending that it was Oxfordshire, but politically it was quite tumultuous, the place that we were shooting in, and we were shooting a thing about the English Civil War in the 17th century. So it actually, I think, injected the piece with so much of what it needed, and we couldn't have got in modern day, gentrified, very, very calm and peaceful Oxfordshire had we really shot there. I think it's really important that every environment is so different, and that I really want to be able to be malleable in that way, and to be able to suck in what's around me and use it. And I think that gives each character that's created a separate world. It gives each piece its own tone, authenticity, beauty, personality. I think those things are really advantageous. I really would never want, I hope this never happens, to get to the point where I'm churning out a lot of very different sort of awards-worthy performances that all live within the same spectrum. And I feel like the conditions that you just talked about, trying to be too much in control of those, in a sense, is removing yourself from life, removing yourself from interaction, removing yourself from the things that are the most important when you're an actor, which are people. Is actually seeing the people that it's so important to get the bus, it's so important to walk, it's such a catch-22 situation almost, being a successful actor, I think, for some people, because life stops being about normality, whatever the fuck that means. But it starts to become so you can become disconnected. But then if you become so disconnected, are you ever going to be able to really connect with a human being and then reflect them and step into their mind space for the time that we were talking about earlier? Probably not.
The Me Too movement really changed my life. I'm looking at my misogyny for the first time in a real way. I didn't realize the depth of it. And you said something, you said transformation as a female actor is allowed up to a certain extent as long as they can recognize you on the red carpet. For a woman to be a shapeshifter and to be that malleable in spirit is really not okay with the patriarchy. And that really hit me because, and I'm speaking about you, when I examine my approach to you as an actor, like, I'm more comfortable when you are leaning into your attractiveness. Like, I discovered that. Like, what is it about that? Like, when you're not, even though I love, like, Nancy, love it, but what is it about me being comfortable when you're leaning into your beauty? Knowing this about men, and knowing that you want your roles to be with more depth. Do you actively have to play this game as an actress?
Certainly, in the past, there were times when I felt like I needed to step up and play the woman. Not when I was actually in character, but when I was working outside of my work, so when I was in meetings or in social situations involved with my work. And that feels very depressing and confining. Like, one of the characters that I felt I really loved making this film so much, and I love the film. But one of the characters that I felt so uncomfortable and I sort of kicked against so much as I was going into it was Laura in Birdman. Because she was somebody who operated very sexually. Which I do in my own life, but it's a different brand of sexuality than hers. She was hungry for all sorts of things that I didn't identify with. She was desperate to be seen. In every way. And, I was playing her at a time in my life where I was trying to hide at all costs, where I didn't feel comfortable playing her at first, but I so wanted to because I loved everything about the project, and I loved the project, and our helmsman was so extraordinary, and it was such a pleasure. But that's something I really kicked against. It's almost there was a feeling of sadness when I had to go into this familiar mindset of being desperate for male attention. There was this sort of mourning period I had to go through at the beginning of playing that character, which was really weird, odd, strange, depressing. I didn't feel, during that film at night, I would kind of feel not like going out. And I loved making the film, and I loved the people who I made that film with. We all had a brilliant, brilliant time creatively and otherwise. But it's sometimes playing a woman in a world where we have so many preconceived ideas about cinematically how a woman should look, and I don't mean aesthetically, I mean emotionally, what the temperature of a woman should be, the emotional temperature of a woman should be. It's hard to identify with those, what are now deemed archetypes, but really, it's often hard to, I find it hard to identify with people who are not written as whole living human beings. A huge part of that, I always think, is that we need more female writers. Not because men cannot write women or women can't write men, but because we just need some more examples of what goes on inside of a woman's head. We've just had more examples of what goes on inside of a man's head, that's all. So it would just be useful. It'd be really useful to get some different perspectives. Yeah, and I think in terms of the sort of shape-shifting, that's what I always wanted, and I didn't know that it would be so hard. I didn't know the response would be, I came out with all these idealistic notions that the response would actually be very warm, but the response often is, not now, because I have a body of work and so often have conversations with people who, really have enjoyed the difference. But I was surprised that it was met with such confusion and coldness, the different approach that I wanted to take with each human being that I was playing. And I thought that was quite a basic part of my job. But that's the part of my job that I really enjoy. And I understand that some people, that's not why they do this job. You know, they enjoy other parts of the job. They enjoy being in their own rhythm. The world changes around them. Yeah. That's what people love to see, and they love playing as true to themselves as they possibly can, you know? So it's all valuable. Every approach is valuable. But yeah, it was odd being, I think it kind of frustrated people. Perhaps, I don't know. I can't get inside the minds. For me, all I was thinking of was Peter Sellers, Ronnie Barker, you know, people that I, you know, and some of those, I'm talking about two incredibly, like, in many ways, bold performers, not with you know, the utmost subtlety. There was a lot of comedy, but the transformation is so fascinating, and I it was very difficult to look and to see a lot of women who were doing it, and I don't think it's because they don't have the capacity. I think it's because they weren't encouraged to. They were encouraged to be, you know, the keeper of honor, the emoters, but they weren't, unless they were villainous, you know. Maybe it's something to do with, it's interesting that we're talking about, because maybe it's something to do with shape-shifting and witchcraft. Maybe, honestly, it unsettles people. Do you know, I genuinely mean that. There's sort of trust element of, whoa, I can't put you anywhere. What the fuck's going on here? I don't trust you.
That's what I was talking about before. When you're more woman-like, I'm comfortable. I literally mean, like, I can relax with you.
That is so weird.
Isn't that messed up? But I could still be a fan.
Completely understandable.
Though. Yeah.
Completely understandable. I totally get it.
Yeah. I told Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Yeah.
I had him on, and I said, buddy, you have a Riseborough disease. You're so good, and you change so much that people don't recognize you as much as they should. It's when actors are so, like, you're so good that there isn't, like you were saying before, like this awards type thing is not really awarding great acting. It's awarding some other kind of thing, like you are fitting in with what we can deal with, or something like that. Not with the work. Thinking about it like this, does that side of this whole aspect even enter in your decision-making process? Meaning, like, I need to start getting these kind of things where people can be comfortable with me, so that I can broaden this out.
I've been offered those and turned them down.
I figured, yeah.
I'm an Academy member now, and you know, I think we're moving in a really fantastic direction there. There is so much more to be done.
Yes.
So much more to be done. The amount of responsibility that being an Academy member holds is, I think, it's really unfathomable what an effect you have on the world, what an effect you're overlooking or not overlooking something has on the world, how that affects kids seeing their own image up on a billboard, somebody they can identify with on a billboard. I mean, it's a hugely powerful body. So I think we've got a really long way to go, and I'm so pleased to be part of it. I feel like as much as we can shake things up, the better. As many perspectives as we can get in, as much as we can open our minds to new things, the better. Yeah, I mean, there've been, of course, there've been lots of things that I've sort of not fought for if I've been wanted for them, and then, thought, well, missed out on that nomination, or there've been lots of things like that, or things that I've been offered and I haven't done that. But ultimately, I thought they ended up being dreadful films, and that's I would really love, for all sorts of different reasons, I really love the things that I've been in.
Yeah.
And I really feel like I can rest easy thus far. I'm British, I'm sure I could have cashed in on the having a career playing posh British people swanning around drawing rooms thing. I've done that. I don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And it's also not where I'm from. It's also not where my heart lies. Those aren't necessarily the stories at the forefront of my mind, although they may be very awards favourable.
Right.
Or they've occupied that award space for quite some time now.
Yes.
But I think a lot of things are changing. Some of the people who were part of telling those stories are now being sentenced to time in prison.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, a lot of things are changing.
Yes.
The industry is from the inside almost unrecognizable.
Yeah.
In the last couple of years, and I think that's really, really encouraging. And I think we've got a really, really long way to go. I think along with the responsibility of how influential the film industry is in America and the US comes a responsibility to be inclusive.
Yes. Yes.
Creatively and in every other way.
And you give me hope.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Andrea Riseborough, Maestro, thank you.
Thanks so much for having
much.
me. It's so lovely to meet you.
Because we reached this 100th episode milestone, I'd like to thank some people that continue to make this show possible. Melissa King, Spencer Rain, Anna Raviv, Jonathan Rumi, Mia Murray, Christian Gonzalez, Joel Rinaldi, and last but not least, Scott McCauley. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Back2OnePodcast. If you have a question or comment, write to me at back2onepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.